Have you ever been to a bar that required a password to get in? Where the police were paid to disappear? Where the liquor could literally blind you? Where 8-year-old kids got paid to protect you? Sounds like a movie. It isn't. It was a normal night in Chicago in 1926. And the 20 facts I'm about to show you are so well documented, specific, and absurd that your only problem will be believing they're real. Fact 1. The password no one saw coming. Chicago, September 1926. In the middle of Prohibition, the Paradise Club operated behind an unmarked door, and nobody got in without saying the right password. But here's the strange part. The password changed every 24 hours, and it was always a line from a religious hymn. That's right. A church hymn used to get people into a speakeasy. On Sunday night, September 12th, the phrase of the day was, "Abide with me." Running the place was Earl Bishop Torrio, a former seminarian who left the path to the pulpit and ended up in the bootleg whiskey business. He personally picked the phrases, and anyone who said it wrong was thrown out on the spot. That same night, 6 federal agents tried to get in undercover, putting on the neighborhood accent, and ended up stuck out there on the sidewalk. In that Chicago, even faith worked as a cover for crime. Fact 2. The drink that really left you paralyzed. Here's a story your grandfather probably never told you. During Prohibition, there was a cheap drink making the rounds in speakeasies called Jamaica Ginger, or just Jake to the regulars. It cost about 10 cents a shot and did the trick for anyone who wanted a drink without spending much. But in 1930, some clever manufacturers decided to mix the formula with a chemical called triorthocresyl phosphate just to fool government inspectors. The damage was unbelievable. Around 50,000 Americans were left with their legs and hands paralyzed for the rest of their lives. People started calling the condition Jake leg. And you could spot someone affected by the way they walked, dragging their feet. And the most outrageous part, nobody went to jail. Nobody got sued. The manufacturers simply slipped money under the table to federal agencies and went on with their lives. Fact 3. The safest speakeasy was in a church. Now, pay attention to this story because it sounds way too wild to be true, but it is. In Detroit, between 1927 and 1929, St. Michael's Lutheran Church had a little secret hidden in the basement. Every Saturday night while the whole city was dodging Prohibition, church members would head downstairs to drink cold beer. And the pastor, he handled the cash himself, setting aside $2 from every entry as a special tithe. When federal agents finally showed up at the door in March 1929, they found 140 people downstairs, 3 barrels of beer, and the pastor sitting there calm as ever with the Bible in his lap. The man walked free. But not a single parishioner said a word against him. After all, who's going to rat out the guy serving the best beer in town and still making sure you get into heaven? Fact 4. Eliot Ness never really shut down a speakeasy. Here's one that might ruin a childhood hero for you. Eliot Ness and the famous Untouchables worked more like a marketing team than a serious police force. Between 1930 and 1933, they carried out only 11 major operations. They took down just 1 distillery and arrested 38 guys, and none of them spent more than 18 months behind bars. Meanwhile, Chicago was packed with around 10,000 speakeasies running at the same time side by side. According to the FBI's own estimates, Ness's crew barely touched 0.4% of the city's illegal liquor trade. The rest of the legend came from the newspapers back then, which needed to sell headlines and turned an ordinary agent into an American myth that Hollywood later embraced without a second thought. If hidden history like this fascinates you, hit subscribe and stick around. More myth-busting facts are coming your way. Fact 5. The menu that saved the bar. Here's something not many people know. The fancier speakeasies in New York served better food than a lot of the city's regular restaurants. And it wasn't just for show. It was a survival strategy. The police had the authority to shut down an illegal bar, but they couldn't touch a restaurant. So the owners turned the kitchen into a legal shield. The 21 Club, which opened in 1922 on 52nd Street, served duck l'orange, lobster thermidor, and top-quality filet mignon. Federal agents tried to shut the place down 5 times. And every time they raided it, the owners showed the judge the menu and said, "We're a restaurant, sir." It worked every single time. The 21 Club was never shut down. It made it through all of Prohibition and is still open today, more than 100 years later. But behind all that glamour, people were paying a very high price. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Fact 6. The warning system for police raids. Around 1925, Dutch Schultz came up with a setup that's still impressive even today. He paid a New York switchboard operator $200 a month and she kept her ear on police radio calls. The second a raid was planned, she'd call the Speakeasy and give the code phrase, "Your neighbor is sick." That was the signal to move. From the warning to the cops hitting the door, they had about 4 minutes max. And believe it, in 4 minutes, that crowd could work miracles. They'd hide 200 bottles in a fake basement, flip the tables around, and by the time the police walked in, the bar had already turned into a regular lunch spot with people eating sandwiches like nothing had happened. In other words, organized crime was already using technology, bribery, and a stopwatch long before Hollywood ever put that on the big screen. Fact 7. The kids who kept watch for the bootleggers. Here's something your history books probably didn't tell you about Prohibition. In working-class neighborhoods in New York and Chicago, speakeasy owners had a pretty clever warning system. And guess who did the job? Boys between 8 and 12 years old. They stood on the corner keeping watch. And whenever they saw a cop coming, they'd let out a whistle. They made 50 cents a night. Their nickname was Canaries. Most of them were the sons of Italian and Irish immigrants, and a lot of that money went straight toward paying for school. In 1928, the Chicago Tribune did a survey and found 847 boys doing that job on a regular basis. The part that still bothers people today, not a single adult was taken to court for exploiting those kids. Nobody paid for it. Fact 8. The medicinal whiskey doctors prescribed. Here's something not many people know. Prohibition had a huge loophole. Alcohol for medicinal use was still legal. In 1921, the federal government issued 57,000 licenses, allowing doctors to prescribe the famous medicinal whiskey. In the first year alone, 11 million doses were prescribed through doctors' offices. And here's the crazy part. In Detroit, one single doctor signed whiskey prescriptions for 411 patients in just one day. All of them supposedly suffering from heart problems. Coincidence? Hard to believe. Behind the biggest pharmacy chain distributing that therapeutic alcohol was none other than Meyer Lansky, one of the masterminds of organized crime. The scheme brought in $3 million a year, a fortune at the time. While ordinary people were getting arrested over a beer, the big shots were getting rich with the law's own blessing. Fact 9. Here's a story that'll leave you speechless. Right in the heart of Washington, D.C., inside the famous Willard Hotel, there was a speakeasy running on the 8th floor. And get this, it stayed open nonstop from 1920 to 1933, right under the law's nose. Now, here's the wild part. Who was drinking there? 31 sitting senators, 89 members of Congress, 2 cabinet secretaries, and 3 Supreme Court justices. Yeah, my friend, the same men making the country's laws were the ones breaking them the most. And the heaviest detail of all, one of those justices had voted to keep Prohibition in the Constitution. The guest book with all the names was burned in 1934, probably to protect people's reputations, but a few photos survived, and to this day, they still show the hypocrisy of the people running the country. Fact 10. Corruption had a price list. In Chicago in the 1920s, bribery became an organized business with a fixed price list, like a restaurant menu. The mafia sat down with the police and worked out the rates by hand. Small speakeasy $75 a month. Medium-sized $200. The big ones paid $500, no questions asked. The deal included protection from raids and even better, a phone call warning them when inspectors were on the way. Al Capone even had a guy nicknamed Chief of Police, just to collect the money. Add it all up and Chicago speakeasies were pouring $75 million a year into bribes. Around $1.3 billion in today's money. And if you thought that was outrageous, hold on because something even stranger was going on behind the scenes involving people no one would ever expect to be mixed up in it. Fact 11. The speakeasy that became a legend without ever existing. Here's one of the smartest moves of the Prohibition era. In 1923, all of New York was talking about the Elf Club. Newspapers mentioned the place. Society columns talked about who had been seen there, and even celebrities claimed they'd had drinks there. There was just one detail. The Elf Club never existed. It was all made up by columnist Walter Winchell, who created the fake address to throw off the police and protect the real hot spot, the Silver Slipper. For 2 full years, federal agents ran around looking for a bar that only existed on paper. Meanwhile, the Silver Slipper was serving whiskey to 300 customers a night, 6 nights a week, without ever getting raided. Proof that back then a good lie was worth more than any lock on the door. If hidden history like this fascinates you, hit subscribe and stick around. More myth-busting facts are coming your way. Fact 12. Ice, the most profitable product. Here's a story nobody told you about Prohibition. In the 1920s, ice was worth gold in major American cities. A 100-pound block cost about $1.50, but a cold drink in a speakeasy could bring in 8 times that much. And there's more. The same trucks delivering ice through the streets of New York and Chicago were carrying whiskey hidden in the back. Same drivers, same routes, same schedules. When the police pulled them over, they looked at the ice on top and waved them through. Hardly anyone ever checked the bottom of the truck bed. That's how the ice industry grew 340% between 1920 and 1929 in cities packed with speakeasies. Ice wasn't just about keeping drinks cold, my friend. It was cover. It was a front. It was the silent partner in the biggest smuggling operation this country had ever seen. Fact 13. The night all of Chicago went dry. On October 14, 1924, newly elected Mayor William Dever decided to make history. He mobilized 4,000 police officers in a coordinated operation, hitting every known speakeasy in the city at the same time. It looked like the final blow against the underworld. By sunrise, 281 places had been shut down and 200 people were behind bars. Newspapers celebrated it as a victory for the law. But then came the part nobody saw coming. In just 7 days, 400 new speakeasies opened at different addresses. The illegal liquor trade grew 12% the following month. Mayor Dever looked at the outcome, swallowed hard, and never tried anything like that again. Chicago had sent a clear message. You can arrest the man, but you can't stop an entire city from being thirsty. Fact 14. The champagne that was really vinegar. In 1926, the Bureau of Prohibition decided to investigate what was actually being poured into glasses at New York speakeasies. They collected 500 bottles being sold as imported French champagne and sent them to the lab. The results left everyone stunned. Only 6% were real champagne. 31% were cheap wines with fake labels. 41% were a dangerous mix of industrial alcohol, citric acid, and injected carbon dioxide. And get this, 22% were literally vinegar with artificial bubbles. The price, $12 a bottle, the equivalent of about $210 today. And the craziest part, customers drank it, smacked their lips, and swore they could taste the authentic flavor of Paris. Most of them had never had champagne in their lives, and had no idea what they were actually swallowing in that golden age of bootlegging. Fact 15. The dancer who was a federal agent. Few people know this, but one of the sharpest weapons in the Prohibition Bureau wore high heels and served drinks. Zona Gale was one of the first female federal agents, and between 1923 and 1926, she infiltrated 14 speakeasies by posing as a dancer and waitress. On her own, she helped put 47 speakeasy owners behind bars. The setup was simple and clever. She took the job, worked for about 3 weeks, wrote down everything about the operation, slipped out quietly, and came back later with a warrant in hand. Even with that record, the Bureau never publicly recognized her work. Her boss believed women had no place in the field. And here's what's coming next. We're getting to the facts Hollywood made sure to leave out. The next 5 are the most well-documented in the story and at the same time the least talked about. Fact 16. The speakeasy that stayed open for 13 years without ever closing its doors. Let me tell you a story not many people know. In New York on 52nd Street, there was a place called the 21 Club. It opened in December 1922, right in the middle of Prohibition. And here's the incredible part. It didn't close for a single night during the next 13 years. That's right, 4,745 straight days. The owners, Jack Kindler and Charlie Burns, were smart. They spent $300,000, a fortune at the time, on a movie-worthy security system. There was a secret wine cellar that only opened by pulling a hidden lever, a special pipe system that could destroy every bottle in seconds if the police showed up at the door, and fake walls made of solid steel. When Prohibition ended in 1933, do you know what they did? They simply unlocked the front door and kept serving whiskey out in the open like nothing had happened. Fact 17. The money that bought judges. Here's a number that'll leave you stunned. Between 1924 and 1930 in Cook County, where Chicago is, 73% of criminal cases tied to speakeasies ended in a dismissal. That's right. Almost 3 out of every 4 defendants walked free. It looked like magic, but it was really cash-changing hands. In 1928, the Department of Justice decided to dig deeper, and what they found was sickening. Out of the county's 17 trial judges, 12 were on the mafia's payroll, getting paid between $500 and $2,000 per case, a fortune back then. 3 of those judges were indicted. One of them hit the road and disappeared into Mexico before the trial. The other 2, they were acquitted by their fellow judges sitting on the very same court. American justice had a price and organized crime paid in cash. Fact 18. The whiskey that walked out through the pharmacy door. Here's a story not many people know. In 1920, when Prohibition began, Walgreens had only 20 stores across the country. 9 years later, in 1929, that number had jumped to an incredible 525. So how did a drugstore chain grow that much during the exact period when alcohol was banned? The answer was a loophole in the law. So-called medicinal whiskey sold with a doctor's prescription. A 1932 internal audit showed that 40% of Walgreens' revenue came from alcohol-based products. Charles Walgreens, the founder, refused to testify before Congress that same year. And when Prohibition finally ended in 1933, Walgreens was already the biggest drugstore chain in the United States, built in large part on shelves full of bottles. Fact 19. When the police themselves drank the evidence. On July 15, 1929 in Detroit, federal agents pulled off what looked like one of the biggest Prohibition raids of that summer. They stormed warehouses, took down bootleggers, and walked out with no less than 30,000 bottles of illegal liquor. Everything was taken to the evidence room at the 5th Precinct and locked up tight. At least that's what they said. Now get this. In just 3 weeks, 28,000 of those bottles simply vanished from the official records. The investigation that followed uncovered something sickening. The police themselves were reselling the confiscated alcohol to the same bootleggers they had arrested just days earlier. A perfect setup, profitable and outrageous. The precinct chief ended up getting fired. But here's the part people still can't stomach. Not a single officer was arrested and not one of them spent a single day behind bars. Fact 20. The day Prohibition ended and nobody really celebrated. December 5, 1933, 5:32 p.m. Utah became the 36th state to ratify the 21st Amendment. And just like that, Prohibition officially ended in the United States. But wait until you hear what happened next. Al Capone was rotting away in the Atlanta prison, consumed by syphilis and already losing his mind. Elliot Ness, the man who chased him, was out of a job. And the owners of the big speakeasies, the same guys who had built coast-to-coast distribution networks, they simply got a license, kept the same trucks, the same routes, the same customers, and carried on with business now legally. The only thing that really ended was the insane profit. Crime didn't leave the stage. It just changed suits. Hollywood sold you the pretty version for 90 years. Now you know the real.